Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, February 3rd, 2026. Oh my, well, time to do this all over again. And once again, we have 18 billion hours of news to fit into 2 hours. But perhaps with things a little bit more wide open today, we can hit a few more, well, probably the low lights, low to mid lights, I would say, in terms of what sort of news we have today. It is what it is. It's another day in the Trump era, and we're counting things down. And that's good news. And although we're counting up with the government shutdown. Yes, technically we are in partial government shutdown. More government shutdown than probably most people thought because, we sort of got the picture obliquely. Oh, okay, well, there's a deal in place and they're going to pass 5 of the outstanding 6 appropriations bills out of the 12 that they're supposed to pass annually. And they have a continuing resolution, short-term, 2-week continuing resolution deal in place for Department of Homeland Security. Plus, of course, we're always being reminded that much of the problem, many of the problem children of DHS, although really the whole thing is a bit of a problem child, or they're all problem children. The ICE folks are funded through the, still can't believe we have to call it one big beautiful bill. It was really ridiculous that they went ahead and did that. I mean, that was just something that Trump couldn't think of a description of the bill, so he just said that, and now that's the official name because everybody has to get out of the way of the emperor or whatever. But anyhow, there's so much money in there for ICE that it didn't really matter whether their annual appropriations bill went through or not. It's tangled up in all sorts of problems and litigation elsewhere. We'll see if we can get around to some of those cases as well. Everything's connected. But recall that the Senate worked the deal out for itself and said, sure, this is how we'll approach it. And I think they did, in fact, pass 5 out of those 6 appropriations bills, having split them up. Or I don't know whether they passed one 5-bill minibus and then a CR deal. But either way, it has to come back to the House for them to redo it because they sent it back in different form. And the House is really basically only returning to town today. Some of them came in yesterday, but they'll only start taking care of legislative business and doing votes, and probably only suspension votes at that. Probably by tomorrow, we'll get an answer as to whether or not the House intends to agree and go along and reopen the government. And in the meantime, it's closed. And no one's moving with any particular urgency because it's not the full government or even more than half, I guess, of the government. And of course, most of the government operations people have their eyes on are the immigration abductions and people nearby who aren't immigrants at all, but prefer that people not be snatched off the street, or they're just in the wrong place at the wrong time and they're getting snatched up off the street to prove that you shouldn't be in the way of people getting snatched up off the street. You see the picture. Well, anyway, we are in shutdown, and I guess where are we? We're in day 4 of that shutdown. So shutdown, we're counting up. Everything else, we're counting down, just by way of informing you. If I haven't screwed it up somewhere along the line, and that I do it, manually. At some point earlier on, I checked the number of dates, and who knows, AI slop might have given me the wrong answer, but they seemed about right. And although at one point, I think I asked a question, and the AI slop actually gave me the obviously wrong answer about how many days there were until something that was happening. But we're just over 1,000 days, I guess. If you're counting in the thousands, I guess you could say just over it by 82 days. 1,082 days remaining in what is supposed to be Trump's last legal term in office, although who knows, and we don't know whether he'll occupy office extra legally after that, or actually, I guess they have a case to make that says, sure, I guess you're limited to 2 terms but most people probably think of those two terms as being consecutive terms. And I guess if they're not consecutive, are you limited to two consecutive terms? But if you break it up 100 times, you can just keep going, or what? No one's ever tested it. And then, of course, there's always just the claim of, to hell with it, that's just a constitution. We don't follow that. Anyway, 1,082 days remaining there, 273 days until the midterms, the big midterms that everybody's been talking about for a year already, and 334 days until, once those midterms are held, we install the new Congress elected at that point. Although, I guess at this point we can start saying it's fairly likely, even under normal circumstances, that some of the people in this new Congress, and if it's tightly divided, I don't know. I mean, it looks like a big blue wave year, and there isn't a big deficit of Republican seats to overcome here. But whatever. If it's tight, then it'll make a difference. But very rarely does everybody show up and get seated, even on day one. It's a very important day, and you're supposed to show up, and most people are, even if they have reason to be absent, they have a cold, they have COVID, they have cancer, whatever it is, they tend to show up for this day and for voting for speaker, and then go back to being absent right away if necessary. But also, very frequently, there are contested elections. I mean, I say very frequently, it's not the norm that there are that many or even any, but it's not so unusual as to be, once in a lifetime event. Every once in a while, there'll be some contested elections, and I imagine there's probably going to be more of them this time around than usual because the Republican strategy appears to be to lie about the outcome of the elections and interference in the elections. So, I mean, the Trump camp is giving us every indication that they do intend to make claims about interference or corruption of the elections in some way. They're still claiming that it was the case in previous elections and seizing ballots on the, I was going to say, almost said on the strength of the claim, but there is no strength to the claim. So anyway, I suppose in any counting, we should be mindful of the fact that in 334 days, when they go to seat the new Congress, there may well be several seats in contention, or at least they will be reported as being in contention, though it may be the case that on the ground in those districts, there's no doubt whatsoever as to who won. It will be the job of professional Republicans to say that there is doubt so that they can get in the way of seating some number of Democrats. Whether it's an effective number or not remains to be seen. We'll see how this shakes out. All right, so there's much in store in Instapaper, still lots that I've been talking about and commenting on online in the social media sphere that hasn't made it there. But I think as we read the big stories, if I'm reminded of details, those things are probably parked in Blue Sky, and I'll have to go and retrieve them. Man, there's a lot. And like I say, it's difficult to know where to start. How about, though, we'll begin with a favorite topic of mine, and I guess of those of you who are such long-time listeners that you remember actually also being readers as well, back when I wrote things down in the old days. And it's about the filibuster. And guess what? It's back in the news and controversial all over again. The folks over at Democracy Docket, which now I forget already whose publication is Democracy Docket. We read it all the time, but are they going to even tell us? I don't know. But this isn't by the big name that was behind the launching of Democracy Docket. Was that possibly Mark Elias? I forget these days. I think so. This is not an article from Mark, but from one of the other folks there, Jim Saxa, who writes a piece under the headline of "Will Republicans Kill the Filibuster to Pass Trump's Voter Suppression Bill?" We haven't been doing much talking about the bill form of Republican voter suppression plans. But they've been out there and floating for some time, so it's possible you have caught wind of them somewhere along the line. And now the filibuster angle. What's happening? Led by President Donald Trump, if you can say that it's true that anything is led by him. A growing choir, usually we go to chorus on that one, a growing choir of conservatives is urging Senate Republicans to kill the filibuster to pave the way for bills that would impose strict photographic identification requirements on the right to vote. There we are, not on the right politically, but on the right to vote, potentially disenfranchising millions of eligible legal voters. Another voter ID type restriction, and once again, cleverly written to maximize the difficulty for communities that happen to not vote Republican and are the least likely to have photo ID for whatever reason. Although many, many people do, and a vast majority of the communities that are being targeted here also do. But disproportionately, I guess, among those who don't, they disproportionately fall into the targeted categories. That's part of why Republicans think it's such genius to do this. Doing so, not only passing the bills, but removing the filibuster, could be a gift in disguise. Well, I'm sorry I framed it. I should just read it. Doing so could be a gift in disguise to Democrats, experts say. What would be? Now you can figure it out. As the filibuster has more frequently frustrated progressive proposals, both historically and in recent years, than derail conservative priorities. It's not that passing the photo ID would be a gift in disguise to Democrats, though it may end up being a gift. Who knows? It may be so unpopular and so disruptive of the vote that, I don't know, everybody goes and burns down their Republican headquarters and captures the guys and puts them on trial for treason. I don't know. I'm not suggesting that they ought to do that. Arson is a crime. Please don't. But I don't think that's supposed to be the gift. The gift, of course, would be the elimination of the filibuster. And sometimes that gift is hard to recognize on the surface. So tell us more about it, Jim Saxa. After passing the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act, or SAVE Act. Oh, I'm sorry. I did skip one sentence. As they said, it might be a gift in disguise to Democrats, but whether that reality will deter the GOP remains to be seen. Will it deter them? Well, they've already passed the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility, or SAVE Act, described at the time as the most extraordinary attack on voting rights in American history. I'm not sure whose quote that is. After passing that through the House in the spring, Republicans are doubling down now on Friday. Representative Chip Roy, you know him from Texas, and Senator Mike Lee, unfortunately is still a senator from Utah, introduced a new version, this one called the Save America Act. Which adds a photo ID requirement when voters cast their ballots to the SAVE Act's documentary proof of citizenship requirement at registration. You see the difference there? In order to register to vote under the SAVE Act, you got to show a photo ID. Under the Save America Act, the other one is just saving, I don't know what, save Greenland, save Puerto Rico, save Russia, I don't know. Show a photo ID when you register. Save America Act is you also have to show a photo ID when you go to cast a ballot. Can't cast a ballot unless you're registered. Can't get registered unless you show a photo ID. Can't get a ballot, though, unless you show the damn photo ID. Again, now it's going to be like going to the doctor's office. I don't understand. Why do I have to fill out this form? I filled it out 100 times before. You already know my social security number and my birth date. That's how you identify me in the system. You ask me for my name and birth date. You already have it. There's all sorts of reasons for the paperwork. None of them make any particular sense for you, the patient. But I guess they make sense for the administrative purposes. But in the end, at least I think, generally speaking, you get the health care. But anyway, here, if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. But if your doctor frustrates you, let's also put that frustration in voting, is basically what we're finding out. All right. So now you have to show your ID when you register, you have to show, or they want it to be, that you show your ID when you ask for a ballot and go and vote. And then who knows, maybe they'll ask you for your ID if you ask for a pen to fill out the ballot. And when you go to the machine to feed the ballot into the reader, they ask you for your ID again, and also to park, and whatever else they might want to do. And anyway, back to our story. A day earlier, House Administration Committee Chair Brian, I don't know how he says his name. Is it Steel? S-T-E-I-L? I've heard both pronunciations for different people, so who knows which one it is. He's a Republican of Wisconsin, and he offered his own beefed up bill. It's even beefed up more than that. Wow. The Make Elections Great Again Act. Make Elections Great Again is MEGA. The MEGA Act, which includes the same photo ID provisions as the Save America Act, is now a third level up on this. Well, also, this one would also force states to end universal vote by mail, like they have in Oregon and elsewhere. Maybe Pacific Northwest is very high on universal vote by mail. Then it would also ban mail-in ballot grace periods if it arrives after Election Day but is postmarked before or what have you. Restrict third parties from helping voters cast ballots, elderly people who can't hold the pen steady and they ask for help, things like that, people who are disabled, people who, I don't know, what other, I'm sure there are other legitimate circumstances under which, but okay, those are the ones that jump immediately to mind. You have some physical disability for marking the ballot or bringing it to the post office. Certainly, if you can handle the pen, you just can't get out to get to a post office box. And of course, it would also prohibit ranked choice voting, which, I don't know, I guess that frustrates Republicans because basically if you ask people to do things like that and rank people in order, there are probably 15 Democrats most people would prefer to even the least objectionable Republicans. So let's get rid of that. Wow, that would be the MEGA Act. The Republicans claim the bills are needed to prevent non-citizens from voting, even though that is already illegal and exceedingly rare, as election officials across the country have proven repeatedly. Still, Trump was again spreading lies about non-citizens voting on Monday, grousing on Dan Bongino's podcast. He's now gone back to that. He quit the FBI, went back to the podcast, though I don't know if he ever quit the podcast, but complaining to Bongino that, quote, these people were brought to our country to vote, and they vote illegally. Not why they weren't brought to the country. That's not why they came to this country necessarily, though I'm sure they one day hoped to be able to vote, many of them. But they don't. And they don't vote illegally or at all, for that matter. Over the weekend, Mike Lee, posted a clip of an advocate urging Senate Majority Leader John Thune to bring it up for a vote, saying it was vital to the upcoming midterms. This is an either-or proposition, Lee wrote. We must either pass the Save America Act, I don't know why you left that out, very soon, or prepare to lose. I don't know that it is any, I'm sure he'd prefer that it be an either or proposition. I prefer it as I guess if they're going to pass it, an and situation. I think they should pass, if they're going to pass it, the Save America Act very soon and prepare to lose as a result. To date, 49 Republican senators have either co-sponsored the original SAVE Act, that was photo ID to register, or expressed public support for it or a similar proposal, leaving just 4 potential no votes. But even if they all ultimately voted for it, the proposal would need at least 7 more votes to make it past a filibuster. Right. And so there you say, oh, okay, here isn't the filibuster a good thing? Maybe yes, maybe no. We'll see. But short term, yes, you don't want this thing to pass. Long term, that's where the question lies. Anyway, the improbability of that, getting 7 votes for the SAVE Act or the Save America Act or the MEGA Act, whichever one they want to work on, is that improbability is what has driven Trump's frequent demands to, quote, all caps here, terminate the filibuster in social media posts and threatening to back primary opponents if Senate Republicans don't comply. I don't know if that worries them very much given his track record, but they are thinking about it. Lee has echoed Trump's calls to end the practice, calling it the zombie filibuster. Far-right members of the House have also encouraged their Senate colleagues to reduce the vote threshold to, well, it says to end cloture. It should probably be to invoke cloture. They want the threshold to be 50, with Representative Derek Van Orden of Wisconsin recently tweeting, "It's time to bust the filibuster and get the SAVE Act done." At the same time, a host of MAGA influencers, including Eric Daughtry, Scott Pressler, and Gunther Eagleman, are urging the GOP to nuke the filibuster. It would be interesting. People's views of the filibuster tend to fluctuate based on what's going on at any given time. I think we all know that. It would be interesting to see whether those guys were always for filibuster reform or were against it when Democrats were in the majority or what. But that does tend to happen. And in fact, my own views evolved along those lines as well. Might as well just say so. It's an interesting proposition, too, by the way, since we parse everything here and split all the hairs and look at the implications of everything. I don't know. I haven't read their bill, and I haven't read their proposal for ending the filibuster either. As I said, we corrected this, saying that they wanted the vote threshold to invoke, we should say, not end, but invoke cloture down to 50. That makes a difference. Are you saying majority rule for the question of invoking cloture, that a majority should be able to invoke cloture, or are you saying that there's a positive threshold of 50 votes? It's different because not every senator always is present to cast a vote. 50 is not a majority, by the way. Right? Even in a full Senate, 51 votes is a majority. 50 votes is a tie, and whatever the proposition is fails. Of course, if it's a Republican project to end the filibuster, the vice president would show up and cast his vote for doing it. But anyway, it's a different question. In other words, if there are somewhat fewer than a full complement in the Senate present that day, do you affirmatively have to put together 50 votes to invoke cloture, or will a vote of 48 to 47 be enough to invoke cloture? It's unclear. They don't cover it. Democracy docket, I think they have the tools to parse it and analyze it. It's just they don't. That's why you have to listen to the show and allow us to handle the parsing of these sorts of procedural questions. It will make a difference. But now back to them. Some Republicans in the House, led by Representative Anna Paulina Luna of Florida. She got a mention yesterday from Greg when he was on the show. She'll be, working to derail things on the shutdown side today and tomorrow in the House. She's got her own ideas about what needs to be included in the appropriations package in order to get her support. And her support will matter as the margins are so slim. Anyway, we'll talk about why what she's asking for is ridiculous, perhaps later on. But at the moment, she's leading the effort in the House to attach a version of the SAVE Act. Oh, it's right here in it. Okay, I thought this was a separate article where this was mentioned, but get this. Anna Paulina Luna wants to attach a version of SAVE. That'd be presumably, well, we don't know what version, but the original SAVE Act is photo ID to register. Remember that Save America is photo ID to register, photo ID to get a ballot, and Mega Bill is photo ID to register, photo ID to get a ballot, and no ranked choice voting, and no mail-in voting, and all of that. Some version of this somewhere along the line is what Anna Paulina Luna wants to attach to the text of the funding bills expected to pass the chamber this week. I don't know if I would say they are expected, but they're supposed to be voted on this week. Luna has even threatened to somehow shut down the House floor if it doesn't. Not sure what practice or what procedure she's looking to do. Maybe probably motions to adjourn and things like that. Like Marjorie Taylor Greene whatever we're calling her now, used to do. By the way, she's also in the queue somewhere out there telling everybody MAGA was a lie from the start. It's interesting. I don't know if I want to hear it from her, but it is interesting. All right, so what does Anna Paulina Luna say? Do not let Republicans fool you. Wow. Yeah, don't. If the SAVE Act or Save America Act is not attached to an appropriations bill, it will fail as a standalone measure in the Senate, she wrote on X. That is why any appropriations package coming out of the House must include it. I am fully aware that the leadership plans to bundle 5 of the bills together, the appropriations bills, the shutdown stuff. However, the DHS bill will be a standalone and must have the SAVE Act attached. And so lots of questions swirling about that one. SAVE Act, Save America Act, Mega Act, which one? Some hybrid? All 3? I don't know. How are you going to do it? Not sure. Shut down the House floor? That will not do it. That'll, make you, make the leadership angry at you, but won't get anything attached, not by itself. And then there's this other thing, which we don't talk about a great deal, but is actually true. So the SAVE Act, the Save America Act, the Mega Act, whichever version you might come up with, what is it about? Well, let me ask you this. Is it about appropriations? Is it about spending money? Money will be spent to enforce the act and enable the act. That's always the case. But is it an appropriations bill? Is it appropriations matter? It's not. Is it therefore out of order, at least in the Senate, out of order to attach to an appropriations bill? It is. There's a general rule against legislating in appropriations bills. They know that you're going to try to attach something to a must-pass bill. There's a rule against that. Hi, everybody. It's me, David, still your host for the Kagro in the Morning Show after all these years. Thank you for all your continuing support for the show. And if you're listening regularly and still thinking about getting on board as a supporter, well, the time is now. Patreon.com is the easiest way to make recurring subscription-style payments every month, all year round, to keep us going. patreon.com/KagroX brings you to our page where you can sign up with your monthly support. And hey, have you seen our clever new subscription tiers? It's easier than ever to sign up for, say, one crisp dollar bill for every information-packed 2-hour show. If you're the plan ahead type, there's even a year-long subscription program that saves you 15% on the cover price. Or it would if there was a cover price, or even a cover, for that matter. patreon.com/KAGROX. Thanks again for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I mentioned to you at the break that there was at least a problem. There's a problem in both houses. Both houses actually have rules against legislating in an appropriations bill. The idea of setting up something like the SAVE Act is not a problem it's a problem by itself because it's crappy legislation and you shouldn't be doing it. But it's not a problem to do in a freestanding bill. And I mean, the SAVE Act itself is I guess they filed it as a freestanding bill, but legislating in an appropriations act means essentially generally legislation versus an appropriations bill. The distinction here is that regular legislation establishes authorization for spending. Appropriations is a different thing. That's actual designation of funds in the Treasury to be withdrawn under a certain account and then spent to pay for authorized programs. That is, programs that have been established in law by actual legislation. It's sort of a check that runs in both directions and bifurcates the overall budgeting thing. We've kind of gone over this territory before, and I know it's weird and unclear and sounds esoteric and stupid and unnecessary to, well, pretty much everybody, including people who understand the process. But you can't appropriate money under the rules, and they do find ways to waive these rules all the time. And they very frequently will do it, but it's something that's easier to do if you have a really solid majority, and Republicans just don't. Not at the moment. Anyway, so it's something that can be done and can be done for big time priorities. And I'm sure this is one of their big time priorities, but they just need more numbers in order to get something like this done in a stable way, at least in order to pass the most aggressive of these bills. But you can't authorize new programs in an appropriations bill, and you can't appropriate funds in an authorization bill. And so the authorization bills are the committees of jurisdiction of mainstream regular jurisdiction. If you want to pass a bill having to do with, police powers, presumably when you submit it in the House of Representatives, and correspondingly in the Senate, it would be referred to the Justice Committee, or judiciary committees, rather, in both houses, and they would, do the regular review of the thing and mark it up and make amendments before sending it to the respective House floor for wider consideration, right? That is the authorization process. I want to authorize a program to, back in the day, you used to authorize programs to help local jurisdictions hire more police officers. Republicans would be for doing that now, despite the fact that we've oversaturated the market for things like that. But back in the day, too, Republicans wanted to do it, whatever it is. Or if you like the Schoolhouse Rock, that one was, you remember the example that they had in that one? School buses must stop at railroad tracks, I think, was something like that, right? Well, that would be an authorizing bill. And then at some point, if you say past that, and there was some, presumably in the original legislation, some mechanism by which federal authorities somehow, this would be a very bad bill. I'm sure it would be helpful in safety, but for federal regulation of local school buses and traffic laws seems like a bit of a federal overstep. I think that the Supreme Court would have struck that one down eventually. But anyway, let's say they're bringing that bill up, right? It would authorize a program whereby somehow magically the federal government would make sure that all school buses knew that this was the case. Perhaps it would authorize a training program for federal school bus drivers somehow, or local school bus drivers with block grants from the federal government would be trained in how to deal with railroad tracks, something like that. Something along those lines, training the drivers to do this, let's say, and training local police officers to understand that that's the law and that they need to enforce it. That would be the goal of all of this. And the authorizing bill, the legislation to require this, would say we would authorize up to, probably, let's say $1 billion in block grants to the states to train people to do this. Right. Well, then at some point, the Appropriations Committee, and I'm not certain which one it might be, probably, let's say Transportation would take care of this one. I don't know. And they would say, all right, so we're authorized by the school bus bill to spend up to $1 billion in all of this. Now our decision is, shall we spend the full billion or something less? Could you try to spend more? Yes, you could. If you did, that would be unauthorized appropriations, also generally against the rules, but waivable, as is all of this stuff. But generally speaking, you try to stay within your authorization and not exceed it, because that impinges on the power of the rest of the Congress. If the appropriators just say to hell with everything, we're going to put money wherever we want it for whatever reason, you'll make people mad within the caucus or conference, depending on what party you are in, and people will take note of that. And one of these legislators on the Appropriations Committee is constantly seeking to exceed their authorization. That makes the rest of us mad. We all want to be appropriators at heart and control the money. Let's kick that guy off and replace him with somebody who will agree to abide by the rules. That could be the dynamic at work. Anyway, the point is that appropriators and authorizers are not meant to impinge on one another's role in all of this. And so it is generally said to be against the rules to do that if appropriators have enough power as it is. If they want to appropriate money for something that is unauthorized, and at some late date as the appropriations process rolls on, like say right now, and somebody says, there's a piece of authorizing legislation that I wish had already passed so that it wouldn't be against the rules to appropriate funds for it. Or I wish it had already passed, but it might not pass because it actually sucks and lots of people hate it. But if I attach it to a must-pass bill, like one where the government will shut down or some part of the government will shut down unless it's passed, then people will be afraid to not pass the bill that keeps the government open, and my thing will sneak by that way. Well, ordinarily against the rules. Sorry, you should have thought of what you wanted to authorize before we started the appropriations process so that we could weigh your authorization against all the other authorizations out there, and the appropriations committee could make a reasonable decision about what they should be funding and by how much. But you missed your chance and you want to sneak in now. Well, it's against the rules in both the House and the Senate. It's harder to waive it in the Senate than it is in the House. In the House, you can do anything by majority rule, and the special rules for the consideration of an appropriations bill can waive points of order against the breaking of certain rules, like the breaking of the legislating in an appropriations bill. In the Senate, very often it will require, how many votes do you think it might require in order to waive such a point of order? About 60? You'd be right. Anyway, so now you can see how all of this works. Will Republicans with like a 1 vote margin be able to muster the votes to waive a point of order against attaching obvious authorizing legislation to an appropriations bill, and an emergency appropriations bill at that, in order to get their crazy vote restriction stuff passed? Well, probably all Republicans would vote for it, though there might be a vote or two. Let's say Thomas Massie might be out there saying, why don't we keep the DHS CR clean, or the year-long DHS appropriations bill clean, or whatever one of these 5 bills they want to attach it to clean. Whereas Anna Paulina Luna says, I don't know, I've been here like 5 minutes and I've passed 2 discharge petitions, so I guess that means I can do whatever I want. And maybe someone, it might be that people are just kind of sick of her flouting the rules and finding these shortcuts. They're not shortcuts really, but finding these weird ways around the rules under certain very specific circumstances. And how come she gets her way all the time? Enough with the Anna Paulina Luna. That sometimes is enough to kill something like this. Even if it's something the whole conference actually wants, they're just like, I don't want her to get it. That really happens. There are those interpersonal dynamics, Anyway, so that's her path to try to get the thing passed sooner rather than later. And there's really no reason why they shouldn't wait and pass it as a standalone measure, except that Anna Paulina Luna says they won't be able to get it through the Senate, she says, as a standalone measure because it would be filibustered. But of course, if you attach it to an appropriations bill, it still needs to get 60 votes in order to waive the prohibition against legislating in an appropriations bill, which she may or may not know about, because I don't know how many rules about how the place works she's actually bothered to learn. So there we are. Luna has even threatened to somehow shut down the House floor if it doesn't get attached. So on Monday, Luna stepped up her full court press. According to CNN reports, Luna is now whipping other Republicans in the figurative sense, although honestly, go right ahead, get a whip. Luna is now whipping other Republicans to vote against the funding package that would end a short partial government shutdown. So how's this going to work out? I don't know. Any last-second addition to the spending package would upset the delicate balance negotiated in the Senate, where Democrats forced Republicans to continue negotiating provisions to rein in the Department of Homeland Security's violent and unlawful immigration enforcement tactics. Still, Speaker Mike Johnson can afford to lose. Let me see here. Get a pencil. Let me make some pencil noises here. Like I don't have any pencil sound effects, so we'll actually do this. But get a pencil and do the math. Okay. Carry the 0, I guess, because the answer is that Mike Johnson can afford to lose 0 votes from his caucus, which is a conference, when Republican-elect Christian Menifee of Texas, who won the special election that Greg was talking about yesterday, is sworn in after winning a special election this weekend to fill the seat vacated after Representative Sylvester Turner died. Not Silvestre Reyes. He's alive, but he's no longer in Congress. So, the GOP's margin in the House will fall to just 2, meaning a single defection on party line votes could doom a Republican-backed measure. That is, if everybody shows up to vote. It can still happen that Republicans can lose 2 votes, but 2 Democrats are sick, sleeping, on vacation, forgot they were in the House of Representatives, are too old to be in the House of Representatives, whatever it may be, and they don't show up. And hey, presto, it does look like you can, in fact, lose a vote or 2 on the Republican side if the Democrats don't show. The headaches caused by adding a version of the SAVE Act to the funding bill, which would then need to go back to the Senate, among other things, right? Forget all of the technicalities I told you about legislating an appropriations bill. If they waive the point of order against it in the House, and the Senate indicates that they too want to and have 60 votes to waive a point of order against this, it still would be a change and means another Senate vote on the damn thing. So, the headaches caused by adding a version of the SAVE Act to the funding bill, which would need to go back to the Senate, extending the shutdown at least a week, without any guarantee that the upper chamber wouldn't immediately strip it out, has led many advocates to focus instead on demanding the Republican-led Senate to end the filibuster to enact the bill over Democratic objections. If that happens, I mean, you see what Anna Paulina Luna here is asking for? She, I guess, would be satisfied to see the thing forced through the House. But she said, again, this won't survive as a standalone bill in the Senate. Well, it won't survive as part of the appropriations bill either if they don't want it in there. All right, well, how about we eliminate the filibuster? Oh, is there anything else we can do for you? 2 discharge petitions, waiver of the point of order against legislating in an appropriations bill, and change the Senate filibuster rule? Oh, right away, Miss Luna. Sure. I mean, I don't know. It could happen, in which case she'll probably think she's some sort of magical fairy godmother somehow. If that happens, the filibuster would then be all but dead in all contexts, said Michael Thorning, director of the Structural Democracy Project at the Bipartisan Policy Center. Now, you could have called me. I'd agree. I'd say the same thing, but they didn't. Everyone who has worked in a legislative body, particularly the U.S. Congress, knows that slippery slopes are real. And the filibuster is already on one, Thorning said. Oh no, slippery slope argument. Any sense that you can carve out some kind of principle around what kinds of policies are still subject to filibustering if we get rid of the legislative filibuster, I think is really wishful thinking. Now, I don't know that the Republicans are actually proposing that may be the path that they try to use to fulfill all of Anna Paulina Luna's fantasies, I guess. Well, we won't get rid of the filibuster, but we will get rid of the filibuster in the case of adding voter ID bills to appropriations bills inappropriately. No pun intended. But not for everything. Like you could declare that was your aim. But, well, there, I guess, the slippery slope argument applies. Yeah, they keep coming up with carve-outs until there's probably nothing eventually to carve out anymore. Anyway, if they were to get rid of the filibuster in general, that would be, it says, good news for Democrats in the long run. The filibuster, for good or for ill, protects more Republican issues than Democratic issues, says Daniel Schuman, executive director of the American Governance Institute. And if you know Daniel, it would be for ill. He's trying to be balanced here, fair and balanced, by saying, well, for good or for ill, it protects Republicans more than Democrats. That's ill. And I know Daniel thinks so. Anyway, giving up the filibuster for Republicans would be letting Democrats compete on a more level playing field, which is not necessarily something that they would want to do. Schuman noted that exceptions for the filibuster already exist for certain nominations, war powers resolutions, and budget reconciliation, and the Congressional Review Act, and a few other things. But anyway, they don't make mention here. That makes it easier to jam fiscal legislation like tax breaks through the Senate than the kinds of social policies often pursued by Democrats, like pollution controls. Why is that? Because the tax breaks, generally speaking, can be done in budget reconciliation, for one thing. And even though, honestly, it was a major mistake to allow that in there, because tax breaks, of course, drive the deficit and the debt up, and budget reconciliation was supposed to be for things that would drive that down, or at least be deficit neutral. But they said, well, it has to do with revenues and it has to do with the deficit, so it's fine under reconciliation. But between that, basically, things that have to do with money and spending and I guess the taxes along with them are things of typically the only things of interest to Republicans. Changing policy, except when it's policy, I guess, to punish people. They're very into that on the Republican side, but only of late. Generally speaking, they were about manipulating the money, and that was of interest to them. And so the filibuster didn't really enter into the picture. But if you wanted to actually make policy, school buses must stop at a bus stop or a railroad tracks, or pollution controls, that's a Democratic game. That's legislating. That's subject to a filibuster. The next time Democrats took control of both Congress and the White House, if this happened, they would simply repeal the SAVE Act, or the Save America Act, or the MEGA Act, or the Save Omega America MFR Act, whatever it is, the most extreme version of the SAVE Act, replacing it with legislation that makes it, easier to vote, for instance, or another host of other progressive priorities. The sanctity of the filibuster, if it ever had it, has steadily eroded over the last dozen years or so, as Senate Democrats and Republicans alike have set it aside. Complex note added here. Most people reading it will say, yes, this is correct, but not here. Senator Harry Reid invoked the so-called nuclear option first in 2013, ending the filibuster for all presidential nominees except for Supreme Court justices. A few years later, Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky nuked that rule to clear the way for a vote on Justice Neil Gorsuch. Now, longtime listeners and readers will know or remember when I tell you. When I tell you to remember it, you'll remember it, damn it. Yes and no, as with most things. The so-called nuclear option, I guess before it was called the nuclear option, then nobody invoked it. When it wasn't called that, it was invoked, but nobody knew that it was the nuclear option, so we forget about it. But yeah, was the nuclear option leveraged before, used before 2013? Yes, it was. It probably in a couple of instances, but at least in the context of filibuster reform, it was certainly leveraged and used, and then they pretended they didn't use it. In 1975, which was when they lowered the threshold for general cloture from 2/3 of the Senate, 67 votes, to 3/5 or 60 votes. And the way they count the 67 and the 60 was done differently, etc. But generally speaking, when they lowered it from 67 to 60 in 1975, using the nuclear option, the version of it that then later got the name the constitutional option, a beginning of a new Congress thing where they said, oh, the Senate, until we accede generally to the continuance of the rules, is operating under general parliamentary law, and we can, if we want, during this special period, this special window, invoke cloture by simple majority vote, which they did in order to enable the Senate to adopt a different rule, 60 votes instead of 67, for the filibuster. And then afterwards, they were so nervous about the precedent that they set, they said, I'll tell you what, rather than going ahead and doing that, as we've now established you can do with rulings from the chair has said, yes, you can, in fact, according to me, the guy in charge, you can shut down a filibuster of your proposed rules change, 67 to 60, with a bare majority, 51 senators voting to do so. You can't do it with anything else, but for right now you can. And once that was established, it made Robert Byrd, among others, so nervous that they said, I'll tell you what, rather than actually, now they said you can go ahead and do that, you've won the vote on that, don't do it. Those of us who are opposing you will instead vote with you to change the rules. I see you're going to prevail. We'll vote and provide all the 67 votes you would otherwise have needed under the old rules to pass the new rule that says you no longer need 67, but only 60. And then it'll look like we passed the new filibuster rule under the old rules and existing rules, which ordinarily say that they require 67 votes, even to this day, 67 votes, if the question at hand is a change to the standing rules of the Senate. But we'll do it that way rather than record the loss that says you can do it by simple majority vote. And that then, it took 1975, 25 years gets us to 2000, so 38 years for anybody to get up the courage to even bring up the subject again and try it. Anyway, just wanted to point that out. It's a technicality. It sometimes becomes important to learn. Every once in a while, that fact changes the dynamics of the debate over whether or not they can do this damn thing or not, or why they're allowed to do it. Not often, but now you know. Back to the democracy docket, which is rapidly taking up the whole show. Democrats later toyed with the idea of ending the filibuster on regular legislation when they controlled both chambers of Congress and the White House between 2021 and 2023. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer had proposed replacing the 60-vote threshold to end debate with a talking filibuster, where legislation could be held up so long as an opponent was, in fact, actually speaking against it. Schumer hoped to pass two critical bills, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and the Freedom to Vote Act. Combined, the legislation would have ended partisan gerrymandering, beefed up campaign finance disclosures, expanded same-day registration, spread mail-in voting, protected voter registration rolls, made Election Day a federal holiday, and reinstated parts of the 1965 Voting Rights Act struck down by the Supreme Court. Does that sound like pretty good stuff to you? It is pretty good stuff. Do you wish we could have done it? Yeah. This is where the debate, I think, comes down now. Well, what if the Republicans nuke the filibuster? They'll be able to do this terrible thing. Isn't it bad if they nuke the filibuster? Don't we hope that they don't? Well, we hope that they don't pass this legislation. Do we care if they do so by nuking the filibuster? Hard to say anymore, because rules aren't rules and law isn't law and the Constitution isn't a Constitution anymore. So it's a little difficult. It's a difficult medium to work in. But under ordinary normal circumstances, you might say, at least, you might say this. Well, if they nuke the filibuster and pass the SAVE Act, but Democrats recapture Congress, they can repeal the SAVE Act. By the same token, if the filibuster is nuked and Democrats say, let's say Democrats were the one to nuke it last time around, well, then the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act would be law. The Freedom to Vote Act would be law. The partisan gerrymandering would be banned. Beef up campaign finance disclosures would be law. Expanded same-day registration would be law. Mail-in voting expansion would be law. But could Republicans repeal all or some of it? Yes, they could have. And then what? Then Democrats take the majority and put it back in place again. Oh, but this is unstable, and that's why we don't want it. Yes, okay, point well taken. But Donald Trump tore down the east wing of the White House. Now stands, by the way, poised to tear down the Kennedy Center because nobody accepts that it's the Trump Kennedy Center. So we'll tear it down and I'll rebuild it with a big T on it. And then everyone will call it the Trump Center and forget the Kennedy guy. And we're going to seize people off the streets, whether they're citizens or not. And we don't need warrants anymore. Come on. I mean, if you're living in that reality, what's the difference whether the state of the law swings back and forth or not? And it always does. That's why we have elections. But anyway, I guess it comes down to this, right? If the Republicans now, they used to be only concerned about fiscal policy, but now they're concerned about social policy too, and they'll impose terrible draconian crap on us. Yes, they will. And that will make people come out in the midterms and say, F those guys, get rid of them. Or in special elections say, which is actually what's happening. So one of the original arguments for elimination of the filibuster was, yes, Republicans will make terrible law with this, and then they'll be held accountable for it at the ballot box. Of course, part of the law that they might be making with it now might eliminate the ability of Americans to hold them accountable at the ballot box. But once we get past that threshold, the filibuster is among the least of your problems at that stage of the game. You see where we're going? The other argument I would make about this is that if each side will do things that the other side thinks are terrible, but their side thinks are great with the power unleashed by eliminating the filibuster or lowering the threshold, if that's a given, then you might as well be the prime mover here. Be the first out of the gate to change things and enjoy, at least for a few years, your version of the way things ought to be in the country. Yes, Republicans, if they manage to win a majority, will undo it. Let them, and then we'll try and get a majority and undo what they did. But at the very least, you'll get a couple of years with the good stuff on the books. And like the ACA, that might make a difference. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, I probably got cut off right at the end. But do you see where I'm going here with this? Because I can wind this up at long last, I think. Okay, so for those who say, well, now that we've started out down the slippery slope by going after the short-term victory of 2013 with the nuclear option, now Republicans are poised to do all these terrible things. Now that they're policy-focused again, and it's conservative social policy that they're looking to enshrine in law here. Problematic. Not that we didn't see it coming. Everybody did. We had this debate from 2004 through 2013, and we're still having that debate. So it's a good 20 years of this debate on this particular point by now. And I guess it's basically comes down to this. In 2013, let's say, just using that as the example here, Harry Reid leads Senate Democrats in eliminating the 60-vote threshold for cloture on executive nominations, with the exception of the Supreme Court. Not really sure why that got carved out, but it did. Could do a whole show on that. Don't. I mean, I won't. But you can. Go ahead. Please do. But everybody then says, well, now we've set the pendulum in motion. When Republicans get in charge, they'll just nuke the filibuster for whatever gets in their way. And that'll probably be a Supreme Court nomination. So they'll nuke the filibuster and put the person on the Supreme Court. And they did, as predicted. And everybody, see, I told you so. But what they don't then argue about is, well, let's see. How long did it take? Did they mention when what's his name? McConnell answered back? It just says a few years later, but it was probably about 2017. It says here. So in 2013, Harry Reid does it. In 2017, Mitch McConnell does it. Now, Mitch McConnell's change affects far fewer actual seats because, Supreme Court at the moment anyway only has 9 seats on it. But it was very important, and granted, they've done some terrible things with it, and that's true, and we wish they hadn't. But I suppose also you could have said, it wasn't really the filibuster per se that stood in the way of Merrick Garland being seated on the Supreme Court. And of course, now in hindsight, it's not like it was would now be any great rallying cry for rank and file Democrats to say, yeah, Merrick Garland would have changed everything. We know. But they got their way, sure, a couple of years later. But what it did mean was between 2013 and 2017, early 17, because the Obama administration came to an end. But let's see, it was probably, November of 2013. So 2013 to November of 2014, 15, 16. And then a few months after that until the beginning of the Trump administration. So 3 years, 3 solid years during which Democrats could fill and did fill dozens, hundreds, I don't know how many judicial seats and other executive appointments. But the ones that last are the lifetime appointments to the federal bench. So there was something like 200 vacancies on the federal bench, I think, when they finally went ahead and did this. And I don't remember how many of them. I mean, certainly there were some still left unfilled that Trump filled in. And, that's not great. But there are still 200 or I don't know how many, some large number of federal judges appointed by Obama. And then, of course, 4 years of Biden appointments as well that might not have been possible without this change. True, it allows Trump to do the same, but, be responsible, America. Elect Democrats, I guess, if you don't like the way this is coming out. I mean, one, there's a voter accountability factor in this too. But what I'm saying is, if both sides then are going to start doing this back and forth, tit for tat, as they like to say when it comes to things like this, well, then all I can tell you is, I don't know whether you want to start with tit or you want to start with tat, but go ahead and take it when it's available to you. You can sit there and say, well, if this starts, both sides will do it. Well, yeah, but then you ought to be convinced that the other side does know that. And if you're not the first to move and take advantage of it and reap the rewards of it, the other side will be the first to move and reap the rewards of it. And that'll suck quite a lot. Yes, the pendulum may swing back our way, but why not start by reaping the benefits, holding your breath and holding your nose while they reap the benefits, and then take back the Congress and reap the benefits again. Be the first to move rather than the second, and you'll always be ahead of the game. Assuming that the swinging of the pendulum is got some fair regularity to it. I guess the game theory of that is if the pendulum does in fact almost always swing back and forth, like I said, just be first at bat. That's all. Why not do it that way? And why not accept that, hey, it may be the case that Republicans will later repeal all of this stuff, but don't we want at least a couple of years with, what was that list of things that Schumer had in mind? The John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, the Freedom to Vote Act, ending partisan gerrymandering, beefing up campaign finance disclosures, expanding same-day registration, spreading mail-in voting, protecting voter registration rolls, making Election Day a federal holiday, reinstating parts of the 1965 Voting Rights Act struck down by the Supreme Court. For a little while, at least, those would be the law of the land. And again, the example I wanted to give you, things like, you said, well, Republicans will just repeal that later. Yeah, they might. But that was absolutely, positively, definitely 100% what people said about the Affordable Care Act. And it was absolutely said, and I was skeptical of it at the time, it was absolutely said, though, by Obama officials and rank and file Democrats who were smart enough to see it, that if the Affordable Care Act could be passed, despite the vicious and bottomless opposition of Republicans to the bill and everything about it, and vows to repeal it with or without the filibuster in their way, the argument went, if we could just pass it and get it up and running, people will come to appreciate it such that when the Republicans finally gain the strength to repeal it, the American people won't want it repealed, and they'll let their Republicans know this, and their Republicans will end up, through public pressure, failing for whatever reason and using whatever excuse to repeal it. And indeed, in various forms, that's what came to pass. We are here, there now. We're there now, and we're where? With Republicans in Congress saying, we're going to join Democrats in fighting to extend the subsidies. Remember, this was a bill, they said, this is death panels. This is public execution orders for the elderly. Your grandma will be kidnapped from her nursing home and euthanized. I mean, these are the things that they said. Not to mention that it's creeping socialism, which obviously is the same thing as communism, which obviously means something, even though now we're allied with Russia or whatever. But, I mean, they threw everything they had at this. This was evil incarnate. And now they're like, well, why can't we extend the subsidies? Or in fact, I demand that we do. Or I'll resign from Congress if we don't. All sorts of things. I mean, that would have been, I think, an impossibility to predict accurately at the time of the fight over the Affordable Care Act. But we did say, nonetheless, let's not nuke the filibuster in order to pass this thing, because if we do, then they'll just repeal it later on. Oh, will they? Now, they might have if they had the power to do so earlier. So there's some give and take to this, right? They didn't repeal the filibuster or eliminate the filibuster entirely. They also had the opportunity to try to do that, to eliminate it in order to give themselves the ability to repeal the Affordable Care Act before it became popular enough. And they didn't take it for whatever reason. And that's a good thing because it gave the ACA time to solidify in the American mind. But there's a lot of factors here. It's a multi-factor consideration here, multi-factor scenario. So where were we? Schumer had hoped to pass all of these great things if they could have either had a carve out or an elimination of the filibuster. But two then Democrats, Senators Joe Manchin of West Virginia and Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona, voted against the plan. Both later left the party before retiring. That was fantastic. Those election bills were hardly the only laws Democrats would have enacted but for the filibuster back then. During the 117th Congress, we're in the 119th now, so a couple of years ago, the House passed the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, or the PRO Act, a comprehensive pro-worker reform package. They passed the statehood bill for Washington, D.C., and the Paycheck Fairness Act, making it easier for women to make pay discrimination claims. Common Cause compiled a list of 17 pro-democracy bills that fell short due to the filibuster. The Center for American Progress issued a similar report in 2019, citing dozens more bills in recent years that either died in the Senate after passing the House or never even came up for a vote because the sponsors recognized the futility, including the DREAM Act. Oh, would that be important now? DREAM Act? Campaign finance reform and gun control legislation, although apparently Jeanine Pirro is going to be helping us out on that one. We'll see if we can get back on track with all the stories I wanted to tell you after we get through this. Thorning, one of the experts, says it makes sense that election policy so often is at the heart of filibuster-ending debates, pointing to the work of Princeton University political scientist Francis Lee, author of Insecure Minorities, Congress and the Perpetual Campaign. The reason this has become so much closer to a reality, although I'm quite pessimistic that the trigger gets pulled on this, is that we have insecure majorities, he said. It's flip-flopping back and forth. The highest imperative right now is for the parties, is not policy making, not accomplishing their agenda. It is the campaign and winning. The idea, of course, behind campaign and winning is accomplishing the agenda, but you got to get there first. Historically, the filibuster has been most often deployed to hold back societal advancement. According to Sarah Binder, a congressional expert at the Brookings Institution, half of 30 measures killed by a filibuster between 1917 and 1994 were civil rights bills, including laws that would have banned poll taxes and prosecuted lynching. That was back when the filibuster was that much rarer. Despite some loud claims by Senate Republicans for killing the filibuster, Schumann thinks they're less likely to do so when push comes to shove. People think about the filibuster as blocking major legislation, and it routinely does, but it also empowers each individual member, he said. The practical effect of the filibuster is that it gives members tremendous amounts of leverage to block legislation that has the support of 99 other senators, at least in theory. So giving it up would be challenging from a Republican perspective because that's what gives members that agenda control. Instead, he suspects Senate Republicans will simply never get around to scheduling the necessary votes. Trump can rail against senators who vote no on a bill, but he can't threaten to primary them when there is no vote on a bill. Right? I would have voted for the Save America Act, so don't be mad at me. It just didn't come up. Sorry. Well, you fight in the shadows because he can't beat you in the shadows, Schumann said, noting that this administration has quietly withdrawn a record number of presidential nominees after it became clear that they'd never get Senate confirmation. And Ed Martin's one of them, by the way. And he, too, in the news. We'll see if we can't get to him in a second. Still, it makes sense to Schumann why Trump is so gung-ho. He thinks that Congress doesn't matter, he said. A more compliant Congress can rubber stamp the unlawful things that he's already doing. So maybe there's value for Trump in doing this, but I don't see why public members of the Senate would want to make themselves even less relevant than they are now, Schumann said. Maybe he means Republican members of the Senate. Anyway, unless they're just enthralled with Trump or afraid to push back against him, which certainly seems true for the vast majority of them. So there you go. That's like an hour on that article. I didn't mean it to be that, but there are other things going on, and maybe we should get to some of them. I mentioned to you the Kennedy Center nonsense. Did I put anything aside on this in terms of write-ups? I don't know if I did. But late breaking news out there is that Trump now says, I'm sure it's been written up by now. Trump has said that he's planning to shut down the Kennedy Center, which, of course, he calls illegally the Trump Kennedy Center, and shut it down for 2 years for renovations. Now, the truth of the matter is that many artists are canceling their engagements at the Kennedy Center because of the renaming and the different direction Trump is trying to take the place in. And ticket sales are down because no one wants to see Kid Rock performing at the Kennedy Center instead of the opera or what have you. And anyway, so he's now come up with this excuse, the place needs to be renovated, and I'm going to shut it down for the renovations, which is more efficient than trying to do the renovations around continuing performances. Well, it's more efficient to do things that way if you're trying to renovate around empty performances, that's for sure. But anyway, so that's the excuse that people think he's going to use in order to avoid the humiliation of 2 more years of empty Trump, quote-unquote, Trump Kennedy Center performances and heading into bankruptcy for the place. So now he floats this idea that he wants to do what he thinks is, he's now estimating at a $200 million makeover, a renovation of the whole facility, which, they don't need. And which, who pointed this out? I think this too is in Instapaper here somewhere, but I'll have to scroll it all the way back. But Julian Sanchez, normative on Blue Sky. I don't know whether it's as well or instead of on X, but pointing out that this weird excuse of, the place is in disarray and needs a makeover. He points out, since a lot of the coverage is omitting this detail, the Kennedy Center had a $250 million renovation and expansion just a few years ago in 2019. You may recall who was president in 2019. It was Donald Trump. But now it needs another 200. And John Cryer, the actor on Blue Sky, I think just pointed that out and said, he's going to tear down the Kennedy Center, isn't he? Yeah, he is. Just like with the East Wing. Well, it needs to be a renovation and it's not going to affect the rest of the building, the building of the ballroom. And then, I'm going to tear down the entire East Wing, and it's gone and nobody knows what, or if anything, there is to be done about it. He'll just do the same with the Kennedy Center. And I think he was asked, are you going to tear down the Kennedy Center? Well, he says, I'm not going to tear it down. We'll use part of it, the steel, the frame. We're going to rip the place down and gut it completely, but we'll leave the steel beams in place and put up something different around the steel beams. Like, that's his idea of not tearing down the Kennedy Center. So yeah, he's saying, I'm going to tear down the Kennedy Center. You bet. Just you wait. Well, I don't know what to tell you about that one. And I could look and see if there's more reporting about it, and I did. And there is. Trump hints at dramatic Kennedy Center renovations that will leave steel fully exposed, reports CNN. And I'll capture that for you and give you a link to it. But you've heard the basics of it here. There's, I don't think at this point, any reason to go any further into the fact that that's happening. I mentioned that Jeanine Pirro, though, was going to be doing the work for us of gun control legislation. I bet you didn't see that one coming. She didn't see it coming either. I'm not certain what the hell she thought she was doing here. Well, yes, I am. Gun control, as always, gun issues is for Republicans a lever, the Second Amendment, for saying Republicans and conservatives and people that we think are conservatives, like mostly white guys, should be able to have guns, bring them wherever they want, do whatever they want with them, because it allows white people to have lots of power. Whereas anybody else, or whether they're of color or just Democrats or just doing things that we don't like, those guys can't have guns. And we've been down that road before. Aaron Rupar captures Jeanine Pirro on Fox News talking to, one of the blonde ladies. I don't know what the context is, but the quote that's pulled here is Pirro saying, "You bring a gun into the district," and we're talking about the District of Columbia. Remember, Jeanine Pirro, Winebox Jeanine Pirro, is currently the actual U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia. They tried to make it Ed Martin, but that was too crazy. So instead they went with Winebox Jeanine Pirro, and she got through. And I don't know. She must be prosecuting a Democratic protester who's accused of having brought a gun to a protest or into D.C. at all. A very broad statement on Fox News. "You bring a gun into the district, you mark my words," she says, "you're going to jail. I don't care if you have a license in another district, and I don't care if you're a law-abiding gun owner somewhere else. You bring a gun into this district, count on going to jail." And that makes all the difference. Except you might remember that it was Republicans who fought for and succeeded, I think, in forcing DC's government, which they ultimately control, thanks to a constitutional quirk, forcing the district government to recognize the reciprocity rights of gun owners, registered gun owners in other states. If you have a license to carry a gun in, pick it, Oklahoma, I don't even know if they have licenses anymore. There are other states that say we don't even have licenses, so it doesn't matter. But any state, if you have a license to carry a gun in Florida, you're licensed to carry in D.C. Reciprocity. It's forced on you. On top of which, one of the, I guess now, landmark reversals of all previous understanding of the Constitution, the Heller case, D.C. versus Heller case that made it all the way up to the Supreme Court, in which Antonin Scalia invented the right, the interpretation of the right to bear arms as meaning you can just carry guns around you at large wherever you go, not keep them at home because you're a Minuteman, not necessarily carrying them because you have reason to believe that your life is threatened. Just general going about armed was never recognized as the actual official interpretation of the Second Amendment. They just did it in the Heller case because somebody owned a gun in D.C. and D.C. said, no, the handguns are banned in D.C. and said, nope, that's actually unconstitutional under Heller. And guess what? Jeanine Pirro now says, up yours, Heller. To hell with that, because it turns out that somebody I don't like brought a gun into D.C., and although our side fought bitterly to make that legal and constitutional, not for you, they didn't. So that should be interesting. I don't even know what the context is of her case. I just found it interesting that they're attacking Heller now at this late date. Ed Martin, also I mentioned, being a part of the news, and let's see if I put that aside somewhere. But Ed Martin is said to be, I don't think I did park it in Instapaper, so we'll scroll back and look for it in Blue Sky and bring you that message. But Ed Martin is said to be getting set to leave his post, or at least one of his 6 different posts inside the Justice Department, not as a U.S. attorney. He couldn't get the votes for that, but as the special attorney for weaponization of government. That is to say, he's supposed to be against the weaponization of government, but is against the weaponization of the government from previous governments. This government should absolutely weapon. Anyway, what they've gone out of their way to carve out jobs for him, and yet still he's apparently getting set to leave that job. And I don't know whether that was because he was there perhaps in an acting capacity or an interim capacity, and they're coming to an end and there's just no more jobs for him, or they're just going to create something else and give that to him. CNN reported the other day, Ed Martin, Trump's one-time weaponization chief, is expected to depart Justice Department in coming weeks. Like the whole thing. I didn't realize that was the case. Paula Reed and Casey Gannon reported it. Martin, who's been working inside the Trump Justice Department for over 9 months after failing to secure a confirmation as U.S. attorney in Washington, D.C., is expected to leave the department in coming weeks, according to a source familiar with his plans. Now, my comment on this was, well, now hold it just a second there. Freeze. Don't you go anywhere just yet. I mean, I want him out of the Justice Department.
Not so fast.
Right, exactly.
Not so fast.
Yeah, not so fast, only because I want to know your whereabouts, because I think I'd like to place you under arrest and try you for just something. I'll come up with charges later on. This is the way the new weaponized Justice Department works. But I don't want him slinking away anywhere that we lose track of him, but I also don't want him in the Justice Department, obviously. Martin had been previously described as President Trump's favorite U.S. attorney, but of course he wasn't a U.S. attorney. But sources say his imminent departure is the result of moves made by another one of Trump's favorite justice officials, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. As odious as Blanche is, I guess he has it in for Martin, which is great. Largely speaking. President Trump appointed Ed Martin as pardon attorney. Right, that was one of the other hats he wore. And Ed continues to do a great job in that role, a Justice Department spokesperson told CNN Monday. So it's unclear whether he's leaving all of his Justice Department roles. I don't know. Martin, a Missouri Republican, burnished his MAGA credentials following the 2021 U.S. Capitol attack, becoming a vocal defender of Trump's voter fraud claims in the 2020 election, now bringing us back to the FBI raids. And of January 6th rioters, some of whom he represented as an attorney. Trump appointed Martin to serve as the interim U.S. Attorney for Washington, D.C. shortly after taking office in January of 2025. Martin immediately started working on Trump's agenda, including demoting senior prosecutors who worked on cases related to January 6th and vowing to protect employees of the Department of Government Efficiency. You remember them, the Dodgy Boys. He ultimately failed to receive enough support from the Senate, and Trump pulled his nomination for the position in May of 2025, just pointing out that despite the fact that they had eliminated the filibuster for judicial appointments and other executive appointments, and this would have been a covered executive appointment, they still couldn't get a majority behind his nomination. So it's not a automatic thing for even the craziest Republican idiots to get into office, but a lot of crazy Republican idiots did get into office as a result. That's certainly true. All right, we got one more segment to catch you up on a couple of other peripheral stories. Tie what we can together today.
Sup fam, it's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Kagro in the Morning Show. And let's finish things up here with one more segment to get to all of this other news. I had a bunch of other connected news. There's still a little bit more about Ed Martin. It is kind of a funny story. I mean, for Ed Martin haters. But let's read the rest of this. Trump appointed Martin, as you know, to serve as interim U.S. Attorney for Washington, but he didn't get enough votes. He could never get the support to get through as U.S. Attorney. Trump then put Martin in several new positions within the Justice Department, including the director of the Working Weaponization Group and the Pardon Attorney's Office. Martin urged for the prosecution of Trump's political adversaries and this summer posed for photos outside the Brooklyn home of New York Attorney General Letitia James, while he was also conducting investigations into her conduct. It will be satisfying to some extent to see Martin get booted from his job without having made any progress towards booting Letitia James from hers. And it stands to reason. She was actually elected to her office, and he was appointed to an office by an idiot and is himself an idiot. You would think this would be the outcome, except you really would have thought he just wouldn't have gotten to this position where he could even threaten the job of an elected official. But he did. And it's interesting that Todd Blanche, I guess, basically must think, this guy is, for somebody like me, Todd Blanche, going on TV saying facially incorrect and stupid things that I'm very often contradicted on by the administration almost immediately, either by their own comments or their actions. That's the job. I understand that. But this guy I can't abide by. I think that's really amazing. Sources familiar with the situation say that once Martin was installed in his office inside Justice Department headquarters in Washington, Blanche, one of Trump's former personal lawyers, made moves to significantly limit Martin's ability to wield power. And to be honest, that's a smart move. Even though he was tapped to lead the department's weaponization working group, a source tells CNN Martin was layered, that's scare quotes, layered by the Deputy Attorney General, and was not really in charge of that effort. And I don't know exactly what that means, but maybe the Deputy Attorney General, Blanche, installed a bunch of people around him that were ostensibly to be his assistants in all of this, but were basically to say, don't let him get anything done without checking with me first. Is that what that means? Well, the upshot of it is this. As a Deputy Attorney General, Blanche is in charge of the day-to-day operations of the agency. He previously served as Trump's personal attorney. He has taken on a more public-facing role as Attorney General Pam Bondi faced a series of missteps. Last week, Blanche led the press conference alone on the release of the Epstein documents, for instance. Now, the fact that Ed was given all opportunity to lead this group and deliver on its mission, but he did nothing. A person familiar with the efforts of the weaponization working group said others across the department have since been making great progress and doing the work that should have been happening under Ed's leadership. CNN reported on Monday that the weaponization working group was expected to begin meeting every day to deliver on those issues that are a priority for the president. It was unclear if Martin was even invited to that meeting. Right? So he's a DNI himself. Do not invite. Martin appears to have more power in his role as pardon attorney, according to sources familiar. He's been actively involved in reviewing clemency applications, but the final decision on pardons in the Trump administration, as in other administrations, is largely made inside the White House. And sometimes Trump makes them himself and doesn't tell anybody until he's already, quote unquote, issued the pardon, meaning he's posted about it on Truth Social, whether he signed any documents or not. Martin's office is currently located inside the pardon office. It's unclear where Martin is headed after he departs the Justice Department, but a source familiar with his plan says he spent most of last week at the White House. So it may not be the case that we're done with Ed Martin. Almost certainly not. He's not going to return to like civilian life. But they may move him inside the White House to, I don't know, do what? I don't know. Run amok, model trench coats. Who knows what he's going to do. But hopefully, wherever he goes, he gets layered there too, whatever that might mean. All right. I also mentioned to you that Marjorie Taylor Greene was back in the news. I guess just for entertainment's sake, we'll read what she has to say. I don't know what to tell you to make of it. I don't know what the hell's going on with her. But I don't know. Have a laugh, I guess, at the fact that she is in the headline from The Hill here, written by Ashley Fields. Greene, MAGA, quote, was all a lie. Well, we know that. But it's interesting to see her come to that realization. Former representative, where she can do nothing. Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia said President Trump's Make America Great Again slogan was a, quote, lie, saying his first year back in office was focused on obliging wealthy supporters. What? No way. I think people are realizing it was all a lie. It was a big lie for the people. What MAGA is really serving in this administration, who they're serving, is their big donors, Greene said in a Wednesday interview with radio personality Kim Iverson, whoever that is. The big donors that all donated all the money and continue to donate to the president's PAC and donate to the 250th anniversary and are donating to the big ballroom, she added. The former Georgia representative recently resigned from Congress after airing concerns over the future of health care premiums, believe it or not, like we said earlier, and the war in Gaza, citing fractures within the GOP and falling out with Trump and MAGA despite the years of loyal support for the president. On Wednesday, she said the people who truly benefit from backing Trump are financial benefactors, telling Iverson those are the people that get the special favors. They get the government contracts, they get the pardons, or somebody they love, or one of their friends gets a pardon. Since the start of the second Trump administration, the president has encouraged wealthy sponsors to provide private contributions for his political endeavors, including the construction of a White House ballroom and the celebration of the 250th anniversary of America's founding. Greene criticized the favoritism for Trump's wealthy allies and also slammed the president for focusing on foreign policy rather than problems at home in her interview. It's the foreign countries. They're running the show here. It's the major big corporations for what is best for the world and what is best for the world. Okay. Not and, but rather than, probably. That's what MAGA is. That's really what MAGA is. We are seeing war on behalf of Israel. We are seeing the people in Gaza, innocent people in Gaza, about whom she does not care, I assure you. Hundreds of thousands of them completely murdered so that they can build some new real estate development. Money can pour in and everybody can get rich there in the new Gaza, she told Iverson. And we're seeing a whole plan play out, which is really a new world order. Ah, there she is, returning to her roots. It's a new way of doing business, and it's the kind of like Scooby-Doo meme where they pull the mask off the bad guy, Greene continued. And you are that bad guy. The former lawmaker alleged that the MAGA movement, quote, isn't really about America or the American people. Just so you know what she's up to. Not super important, but it's interesting to watch. All right, things that I think are more important. I started reading you something yesterday that got really weedy, and I can't promise we won't return to it, but it was about a different subject, about Judge Boasberg and the allegation from the Justice Department that he was somehow undermining judicial integrity and the rule of law in general by mentioning in what was supposed to be the privacy of the judicial conference that he was worried that the Trump administration was already and would continue to ignore judicial rulings and orders that they didn't like, and thereby undermining, the rule of law. And that the Justice Department said, no, the real undermining of the rule of law is pointing out that the Trump administration is undermining the rule of law. We're going to bring charges, a complaint of judicial misconduct against you. And at the very long story short, I wanted to read you the details, but the long story short, just to remind you, is that basically this made it to review by the chief judge of the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, who dismissed the complaint. Now, I don't know whether that's something that the Justice Department is going to bother appealing or not. I guess they can. But basically, in the Sixth Circuit, they said, no, this is groundless and stupid, and it's dismissed on top of everything else. And, the administration continues to prove Boasberg right at every opportunity by doing exactly what he said he feared they would be doing, ignoring court orders and court decisions. But the Sixth Circuit, in rather spectacular fashion, dismissed this thing. And I still need to look for a good distillation of their argument. And I might be able to find it rather quickly. But I wanted to make a couple other stops. So I'll make a note that we want to get back to the Sixth Circuit thing possibly later in the week. And I'll give you other bits and pieces of interesting news, some of which are tied to stories we've been following for a long time, or things that we've mentioned today. Fulton County, want to check in on them? MS Now tells us, thanks to Ebony Davis, that Fulton County is going to go to court. We're back in court again. Going to court over the FBI's elections office raid. They're suing. Hey, local officials are challenging the operation in which agents seized hundreds of boxes related to the 2020 election, which Trump still insists was stolen. And now Fulton County insists that those boxes have been stolen as well. Fulton County officials said Monday they are filing a motion in federal court challenging the FBI's seizure of those records. The filing comes in response to last week's FBI operation at the county's elections hub in Union City near Atlanta, not Union City, New Jersey, which I think of when they say that, in which agents executed a search warrant and removed 700 boxes of ballots and voter data linked to the 2020 presidential election. Fulton County Commissioner Marvin Arrington Jr. said the county argues that the search warrant and the seizure went beyond what federal authorities were legally permitted to do and violated local control of elections. That's all true, of course, or at least violating the local control certainly seems pretty obvious. And remember, of course, there was some defect with the first warrant anyway. Wouldn't it be interesting to find out that there was a defect with the second as well, but a defect of a different kind? Arrington said the county plans to seek the immediate return of materials and will request to have the documents remain under seal in the state. I've asked the county attorney to take any and all steps available to fight this criminal search warrant, Arrington said in a press release. The search warrant, I believe, is not proper, but I think that there are ways that we can limit it. We want to ask for forensic accounting. We want the documents to stay in the state of Georgia under seal, and we want to do whatever we can to protect voter information. Arrington initially said in the news release that the county would file a lawsuit over the search, then clarified that county attorneys will instead file a motion in the existing case that the search warrant is part of. Okay, important clarification. Arrington argued that while the FBI was authorized to copy records under a separate court order, agents instead took the original copies, including in-person, absentee, and provisional ballots. They got copies of our voter rolls, but all the original ballots, Arrington said, adding that the county has concerns about the lack of an official chain of custody inventory at the time of seizure, which is, I think, a huge violation of protocol. FBI agents should have known better than to seize anything without, carefully documenting the chain of custody and taking inventory and providing that to both Fulton County and to themselves for their own records. President Donald Trump has continued to falsely claim that widespread voter fraud cost him the 2020 election in Georgia, despite multiple audits proving that Joe Biden won. Trump renewed those baseless claims during an interview on Monday. "We have states that I won and that show I didn't win. Now you're going to see something in Georgia where they were able to get, with a court order, the ballots. You're going to see some interesting things come out. But like the 2020 election, I won that election by so much. Everybody knows it," Trump said on an internet show hosted by Dan Bongino, who recently resigned as deputy director of the FBI. What an interesting choice to make there. Arrington reiterated in an interview on Monday that the county's 2020 election results were valid. They were counted time and time again, and Trump lost, he said. Fulton County officials have publicly pushed back against the FBI's operation while maintaining that they complied with the warrant as executed. "We will not give 1 inch to those who seek to take control of elections in Fulton County. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. We're going to fight this in court with every resource that we have," County Chairman Rob Pitts told reporters last week. But a change, I guess, now that, so the headline, Fulton County going to court as opposed to Fulton County suing the FBI. That was what they originally implied was going to happen. And it may yet happen, but at the moment, instead, it will just be motions, I guess, to quash this stuff as evidence and to return it to Fulton County as having been improperly or illegally seized. There's also in here somewhere information about I mentioned to you that Todd Blanche was embarrassing himself going on TV when we were talking about him in the context of Ed Martin, and it was how odd it was that, he's doing all this embarrassing work, but even Ed Martin was too embarrassing for him. That Blanche was, I guess, on TV over the weekend, as everybody in the administration is, but saying on the question of the FBI raids, look, the president wasn't involved and all that. He didn't have any role in directing this raid. But by Monday, basically, there was plenty of evidence coming to light that, the president actually was intimately involved in all of it, up to and including to the point of making a phone call, being connected by phone to the FBI agents who executed the raid to talk to them about it after they'd done so. Now, maybe, he's too stupid to talk about most of the operational details. He doesn't know what's going on and doesn't know what they're really looking for. But instead, I guess probably to get on the phone and say, the country, we congratulate you. You saved your country today by doing the warrant thing. And thank you so much. It's really great. But it's still highly unusual for them to do that. The New York Times reported on it. Maybe we'll read it quickly and see if we can sneak in a story or two after that as well. Trump had an unusual call. I can't believe it. That's unusual. That's true. It is. The call was unusual. And in addition to being unusual, it was with the FBI agents after their election center search. Tulsi Gabbard, who shouldn't be involved in this at all, the DNI, Do Not Invite Director of National Intelligence, brokered the call somehow. I don't even know that you have to broker her calls, but anyway, she arranged it. And President Trump directly questioned frontline agents on the inquiry, the Times has learned. So how much arm's length is he keeping from the investigation? Less than zero. He's intimately involved in it. William K. Rashbaum, Devlin Barrett, and Julian E. Barnes team up for this story from yesterday, Groundhog Day, which is also today because it's still Groundhog Day. By any measure, the FBI's search of an election center in Fulton County, Georgia last week was extraordinary and unusual. And, also...
Unacceptable!
I agree. Thank you very much. Agents seized truckloads of 2020 ballots as President Trump harnessed the levers of government not only to buttress his false claims of widespread voter fraud, but also to try to build a criminal case against those he believes wronged him. And they've been trying to build criminal cases against people he believes wronged him for months now, and Ed Martin is completely unequal to the task and has to be shuffled around again after another round of failures in that attempt. Behind closed doors, it does say what happened the next day after the raid was in some ways even more unusual.
That's unusual!
The New York Times has learned. Behind closed doors, Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, met with some of the same FBI agents, members of the Bureau's field office in Atlanta, which is conducting the election inquiry. 3 people with knowledge of the meeting said. They could not say why Ms. Gabbard, who also appeared on site as the search, was there, but her continued presence has raised eyebrows, given that her role overseeing the nation's intelligence agencies does not include on-site involvement in criminal investigative work. This, too, another Blanche embarrassment. I think on Sunday he said, he was asked, can you tell us why she was there? And basically the answer was no. But in a very long-winded way, he said, well, she just happened to be in Atlanta. What's the big deal? That read to others like, you mean she was there for like a football game and then said, ooh, a raid, I think I'll go? Or I think what he was really saying is people are making a big deal out of the fact that she just happened to be in Atlanta. Like, who cares? She was there. She was there purposefully. I don't think he was denying that she was there purposefully. But he was saying just because she was there, that doesn't mean anything in particular. Of course it does. And so he was dumb that he was denying that it meant anything. But also he tried to make it sound like it was a coincidence that she was in Atlanta. And even he would, if pressed on it, would say no. Because there's also reporting, and I don't know if it's in this article, but there's also reporting out there that she was basically sent there. The Trump personally ordered her to go and supervise this thing. We speculated yesterday, Greg and I, that she was trying to get back in his good graces by going and, throwing herself bodily into his false election rigging claims. But in fact, it wasn't even that. And she doesn't even have the opportunity to get in his good graces except by, not disobeying his order to go. I don't think that's in this article. I'll have to dig that one up. Anyway, where were we here? What occurred during the meeting was even further outside the bounds of normal law enforcement procedure. Ms. Gabbard used her cell phone to call Mr. Trump, who initially did not pick up but called back shortly after, the people said. The president then addressed the agents on speakerphone, asking them questions as well as praising and thanking them for their work on the inquiry, the 3 people said. The supervisor of the squad, which investigates allegations of public corruption and civil rights violations and developed the evidence for the search, primarily fielded Mr. Trump's queries, the people said. One official said the call was fairly short, perhaps just a minute long, and compared the conversation to a pep rally or a coach giving an encouraging halftime speech to his players. That person said the president gave no substantive direction to the investigators on that call anyway. And that's easy to believe. I don't think he has the capacity. In a letter to lawmakers who were pressing for more details, Ms. Gabbard denied that Mr. Trump asked questions or issued directives during the call, except, of course, right up here it says, yep, he asked questions. They were probably dumb questions. Did you get all the legal things? Mr. Trump personally ordered Ms. Gabbard to go, there it is, to Atlanta for the search and coordinated her actions with Andrew Bailey, one of 2 deputy FBI directors, according to the U.S. officials. So, by the way, what are the odds that Todd Blanche was telling the truth when he was asked, can you tell us why she was there? No, I basically can't. She just happened to be there. No chance that the deputy FBI directors know that she was ordered to go and the deputy attorney general doesn't know that. I suppose it's possible, but very unlikely. And you could probably show the memo as having been read by him at some point saying, yep, I'm ordering to go. But, the president orders her to go. Can you tell us why she was there? No, I don't know. I can't figure it out. Was it that she was ordered to go? Oh, I thought you were asking me, why was she ordered to go? I don't know the answer to that. That'll get him out of a perjury. I mean, he wasn't sworn or anything, so that'll get him out of the perjury charge. Even for a president who has radically transformed the Justice Department and the FBI by trampling over their political independence and using them as tools for personal retribution, by the way, Mr. Trump appears to be taking that kind of involvement to a new level beyond the astonishing level just expressed to you, but somehow glazed over. Rather than going to senior department or FBI officials, Mr. Trump spoke directly to the frontline agents doing the granular work of politically sensitive investigation in which he has a large personal stake. That's actually the nut paragraph of a very explosive scandal. In other administrations, a White House spokesman, Davis Ingle, defended the administration's efforts in Georgia. President Trump pledged to secure America's elections, and he has tasked the most talented team of patriots to do just that. Mr. Ingle said, adding, President Trump has full confidence in his entire team, but called them to question immediately after anyway. Olivia C. Coleman, a spokeswoman for Ms. Gabbard, said the Director of National Intelligence had a vital role in protecting critical infrastructure and analyzing intelligence related to election security. President Trump's directive to secure our elections was clear, and DNI Gabbard has and will proudly continue to take actions within her authorities, alongside our interagency partners, including the FBI, to ensure or to support ensuring the integrity of our elections. She said that meaningless statement, but okay, there it is. A spokesperson for the Justice Department declined to comment. FBI declined to comment. Open investigation, they said. Mr. Trump's interaction is a major departure from past practice. It is extremely dangerous to our democracy and a shocking abandonment of years of sound policy for the president to be directly involved in the conduct of domestic criminal investigations, especially one that seeks to redress his personal grievances and to make the Director of National Intelligence an instrument of his political will, said David Waldman, 2 paragraphs after they, casually mentioned that this is happening. Waldman served as a senior Justice Department official in both the Republican and Democratic administrations. It's now more clear than ever that the independence of the Department of Justice and the FBI is completely compromised, and they are essentially under the direction and control of the White House. Last month, the president, in declaring once again that the 2020 election had been stolen from him, left little doubt about his intentions. People will soon be prosecuted for what they did, he said in remarks in front of the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Really didn't read the room there, did he? In an appearance on CNN's State of the Union on Sunday, the Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche denied that Mr. Trump had played any role in the search or that he had been briefed on the inquiry. I don't believe he was involved, he said. Well, that's wrong. This is a criminal grand jury investigation. I can't comment on it. Pressed on Ms. Gabbard's involvement, Mr. Blanche said he did not know the reason for her presence, but he nonetheless appeared to suggest that it was not unusual. I don't know why the director was there, Mr. Blanche said. She is not part of the grand jury investigation, but she is for sure a key part of our efforts at election integrity and making sure we have free and fair elections. She's an expert in that space. No, she's not. And it's a big part of what she and her team look at every day, but shouldn't be. The American official said that Mr. Trump, American official, that's it, American official, wow, said that Mr. Trump had ordered Ms. Gabbard to go to Georgia to assist with the FBI's investigation. Other officials have said that the White House has given Ms. Gabbard far-ranging authority to hunt for voter fraud in multiple states. Democrats in Congress, that's apparently by the way, something that I thought Pam Bondi assigned to the U.S. Attorney for the, was it Eastern, Northern, I don't know, in St. Louis, District of Missouri to do that job. But also it's Tulsi Gabbard, by the way. Democrats in Congress have said her appearance at the search raised troubling questions, including whether it was appropriate for an intelligence official to participate in what is primarily a domestic issue. Senator Mark Warner of Virginia reiterated those worries in a statement on Monday. The involvement of the Director of National Intelligence in a domestic criminal matter far outside her statutory role only deepens those concerns and demands for immediate scrutiny. Gabbard maintained that she was acting squarely within her powers, saying in a letter to lawmakers that her general counsel's office had found my actions to be consistent and well within my statutory authorities. Speaking directly with investigators, Mr. Trump may have provided significant ammunition to any future defense should the investigation yield criminal charges. Yes, that will probably help with the people who know the playbook on pleading that this prosecution is politically motivated and selective. So, yeah, that'll become evidence there. His conversation with the agents will probably become part of that effort to have the case dismissed as a vindictive prosecution. Alternatively, if such a case went to trial, defense lawyers would presumably try to elicit testimony from those FBI agents who spoke to the president in the early stages of the investigation, or possibly from Mr. Trump himself. The search itself raises serious questions. It is unclear what evidence was presented to a federal magistrate judge to establish probable cause for a search warrant for those ballots and other materials, which are now more than 5 years old. But multiple prior investigations, including one at the end of Mr. Trump's first term by the same FBI office and federal prosecutors working at the time for Trump-appointed U.S. Attorney in Atlanta, found no evidence to support his false claims of significant voter fraud. Rudy Giuliani, of course, ordered to pay $148 million in civil damages for defaming two Fulton County election workers, wrongfully accusing them of having tried to steal votes from Mr. Trump. Trump, of course, lost Georgia by about 11,000 votes, tried to get that changed by calling elections officials there on tape, both committing that overt act and farting repeatedly as well. So, just keeping you up to date on the modern news. That, too, back in the news as well. I don't think that's what Justice Putnam's going to be covering on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, but it does come up next, so you can listen in and find out for yourself.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
We got so much more, but luckily there's many more days this week. And, of course, the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy comes next. Guess what's up on top? Beauty queen MAGA Lindsay Halligan is hit with a new bar complaint. And on the rest of the menu, DHS has smeared two Venezuelans that they happen to also have shot in Portland, Oregon. Why not?